Okay then. So with that, hi everyone. Good to see you. Haven't seen most of you in a while, and that's because I've been MIA finishing what I'm about to show you right now, as well as the other details of teaching. As Stephen and some others know, sometimes it can get kind of hectic. So if you're looking at the first slide, um, this is BioTown, an open sim learning space. This is the space that I've been preparing now for some time in OpenSim. Space that was provided to me by Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. To try to prepare an area for my students to learn using what I have, using what I know of virtual worlds to help in my teaching. So if you go on to the second slide, a little about me. I am a teacher. I've been teaching for going on 7 years now. Prior to that, I worked at an engineering firm, and prior to that, an oncology lab. So teaching is a second profession to me. My primary profession was working as first an oncologist and then as a soil scientist in environmental toxicology. So now I'm specializing in bringing different types of innovation into the classroom, since I don't feel the method I was taught to teach with, the traditional method, was particularly effective for anyone, not for me, not for the students. So among the things I've tried are gamification, blended learning environments, mastery-based instruction, asynchronous instruction, and finally it came to virtual worlds as a very powerful tool, and as you all well know, it can bring a lot of things to the table when it comes to teaching. I do teach at a small charter school in North Carolina in the USA. I do have a certificate in virtual worlds from the University of Washington, which is my first real introduction on what you can do with this space. So going on to the next slide, my goals with this space, which was a combination of a number of years trying different things out, was to prepare a social virtual learning world that was inclusive or turnkey, something that an independent, a self-paced learner could access and be able to work through the course, if need be, in the complete absence of a teacher. In other words, I wanted this to be something that a student could come to and get everything they needed for the course. They don't have to buy any further materials, get some secondary sources, etc. I want it to be something that was a standalone. I wanted to see if I could make a standalone entire curriculum in a virtual space that students could then access from wherever they are in the world to learn the content. That was my challenge. And I did this parallel to my regular class. So this was a physical class that was coming to a physical classroom, getting on to their virtual world to learn. And it was kind of a blended environment, it was a hybrid environment. We would have FaceTime desks, and then we'd switch over to the desktops, and they would drop in there for a while. And that was because I was testing it out. I didn't feel comfortable doing this with students that I couldn't physically walk up to and check their knowledge of and help them out with the technology, etc. So it was a weird hybrid virtual real world environment, augmented reality, if you prefer. So going to the next slide. This is it. This is the entire thing. The space uses one region. Stephen provided me with two. I've used one and not even the entire one for one curriculum. 16 buildings, 4,500 objects, so not that much of a load. Much of the content I used was free. Early on in my career in virtual worlds, I learned that if the teacher was the primary content creator, they couldn't get to the teaching for all the work they had. So this time I concentrated mostly on what I could bring to the table as far as my learning style, content, and then use objects that were already created. By doing that, I was able to use my time much more effectively, I believe. And eventually, as we further virtual world learning, I do think we've spoken before of having a repository of objects and tools for teachers, so they don't have to be the primary content creators, and that's definitely the way to go. In parallel, the physical classroom, and there at the bottom is where you visit, 8bit.bio/se.info:12043, and it's free to make an account and free to drop in, and anyone that knows how to make OpenSim accounts should be able to get in there. You're free to roam. It's I hope once I troubleshoot everything and make sure, because I just finished this last week, I hope to make it an OR. That's a final draft OR, and then post it somewhere, and anyone can have it to, if they want it for anything to pick apart, to just as a curiosity, or if they can model their own classroom's abstract, that's fine. Um, that's great. And then maybe other teachers that want to try virtual worlds can use it, because it is, like I said, it's designed to be out of the box, ready to go. Okay, so without further ado, let's get to it. The next slide gets you to the beginner's tutorials. Here is where students res. They are a series of panels, very straightforward panels that tell them how to move, how to put on clothes, how to set their preferences, how to move their mouse. So these initial tutorials, and anyone coming in, I see some folks are coming in late. I'll put in the link again. There's the link again to the presentation. And we are on the slide about tutorials right now. So the students can walk through this initial building, and by walking through it and looking at the signs, should have a pretty good idea how to do things. So that's the theory behind it. In practice, half the students actually walked through and read and clicked things, and the other half just kind of went hog wild and ran around and jumped on top of each other's heads, and as you would expect it. It took a good 2 weeks for the class to come down and be confident. Some students had it within 3 days. Some students, it took the entire 2 weeks. But within 2 weeks, the entire class was competent as far as getting into the virtual world, walking around, interacting with items, and changing their avatar. And this is, by the way, a 10th grade high school biology class. So students average between 14 to 17 years of age. Okay, the next slide shows you more of the beginner's tutorials. But what it shows you is some of my try it items or interactive items, things that you had to do. And this is a hallmark of what I was trying to accomplish with this learning space. It can't just be all presentational for the kids. They have to have some hands-on. So what I tried to do, not just here in the tutorial piece, but also in the actual units, is have places where they were challenged, where they were tested on what they knew. And this is an example of that, where they have to, you just learned about how to interact with objects, so now do it. Interact with the object, see if you can get it right. And it's trial and error, kind of like with game mechanics, that you can try as many times as you want until you get it. And that's a powerful tool to do that, to give kind of instant feedback, and you got it right, didn't right, without judgments. And you'll see it later on when I show you a unit. So if you go on to the next slide, interactive spaces. I set up some areas outside the world that weren't strictly content related, that were more for interactions and social experiences. This first one with the whiteboard is simply a space where the kids could sit down, and I could use my graphic tablet to draw on a virtual whiteboard so they could see it, and I could cover content with voice like I'm doing now, but actually draw on that. They could even share that whiteboard with me through their Google accounts, and they could draw on it as well. If I was doing math, it would have been awesome. But as it was a good space to just interact, review content, talk about things. If there were areas that they weren't getting as a group, go over them. So that's what this space was about. Which, by the way, as I go through this presentation, I'm always very informal. So feel free to ask questions. So all this whiteboard was a media on a prim of a Google Draw document that was shared publicly. So new Google Draw document in a Google Drive, shared publicly. Then take that link, put it on a prim, and then all the kids could access it, and using their mouses, they could draw on it. So very, very straightforward and easy. Google accounts are free. So like I said, anyone could use the space. Because it is a publicly shared whiteboard, it will work with anyone that has this. Oh, good. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, there are other similar tools that maybe more slick. So going on to the next slide, I wanted to use the space and ways that I learned at the University of Washington to enhance the teaching. So the next slide, what you see is my color-coded ABCD squares. And all that is for kind of informal assessment of knowledge. I would ask a question, multiple choice in chat, and then the kids would walk their avatars to the square with the A, B, C, or D if it was correct. And that could very quickly, by the number of kids on the right answer, see if they kind of understood the concept or didn't understand the concept. This was effective sometimes. But sometimes what would happen is the kids would look at the smart kid and go where he went. So it's a tool that in theory worked well, but in practice didn't work as well as it could have. And I'll have to think back on how I could use it. It may be that other teachers can find ways to use it more effectively than I did. So that's what that space was meant for. On the next slide, you'll see a similar tool. This one has a range from super yuck to super yum. And what it is another way to assess, this time with an agree or disagreement. So I would make a statement, like, for example, diversity is important for a species. And then the kids would stand with super yuck if they disagree, or super yum if they agree, or somewhere in between, if depending on how they feel about the statement. And then we could discuss it. So again, this is their avatars moving in the virtual space to where they felt they stood on the statement. Does that make sense? And that was a little bit more effective because it allowed them to have more of an opinion and less of an answer. Okay, on the next slide, interactive spaces shows you the tables. So I want to set up an area where the kids could meet in small groups to either work on projects or for tutoring each other or just to discuss ideas. So these tables are set up at a distance where they can stay in local chat and don't have to set up group chats or make groups and discuss things without being overheard. They're, I think, 10 meters apart. I think it's the distance for local chat. I can't remember exactly the number. But they're spaced out so the kids can sit there and talk to each other in regular, open, local chat and not be overheard by the other kids. So that's what that was, again, more the social aspect, which the kids enjoy the social aspect. Okay. 20 meters. Yes, 20 meters apart. Thank you. So those areas were set up to enhance learning. They weren't direct content related. Now, on the next slide, learning management system. So if you're a teacher, you know this LMS term, and if you're not, you may not know it as well. But a learning management system is Blackboard or Moodle or Edmodo. There are a number of learning management systems out there, but what they do is there's a way to storehouse information, assessments, etc., to make a system of managing the learning for the students. So this project for me became a virtual world learning management system. And you'll see why when I go through a unit. So what it does is it has assessments, it has the content, it has a way of organizing the material to provide the information. So it is very much a learning management system. So going on, and you see on that slide, you see some tables and curves presented on easels in one of the units. Going on to the next room, to the next slide, you see the front of one of the buildings, the populations, which is Unit 2. So to provide the content in an orderly manner, so the kids are not overwhelmed, I cut up everything into 13 units. So all of biology into 13 discrete units, each discussing stuff that's similar. And this is from experience from teaching biology over and over again, things that make sense. Now, each unit was made up of material that was related. So, for example, in populations, I discussed a number of things that have to do with population dynamics, how populations grow, and the things like the pyramids that we use to show human population growth. So all these different goals in biology, they're related to populations. So chunking is a very powerful tool in education. And by keeping things in discrete chunks instead of huge areas of material, the kids seem to be able to digest that better. So at the very highest level of chunking in biology is these units, these 13 different units. Okay, so going on to the next slide. So within each unit, there are smaller chunks. So here, for example, within populations, there are population growth, how populations grow and shrink, population growth curves, like the R and K selected curves, and then the type 1 and type 2 and type 3 species, death rates, and different things that affect carrying capacity, which increases the death rate, and finally, how our population, human population, grows, which is different from natural populations. So you see within each building, I use the spatial aspect of the buildings to further chunk the material using things like the big square rugs on the ground and those alcoves to help the kids visually separate the material as well as contextually. So you'll see that again and again as I show you examples of the units. So that's further chunking. All right, on the next slide, each unit was given a flavor or a style. Again, this is again to enhance mnemonics. So when the kids go to a building on, say, homeostasis versus animal behavior versus bioenergetics, they don't have the same look to it. So this will all become muddled and confused. It has a very distinct style, and what I'm hoping it does is help them remember the material. Homeostasis, remember that building looked like an art gallery? Or do you remember that the pet store that was populations? So I try to give each unit a distinct appearance that went along with what the unit was about to help to further enhance how the kids could remember the material. Okay, so on the next slide, I bring you the example unit. I'm going to walk you through the experience the kids go through. So in this case, the unit is Unit 3 on classification and taxonomy. So each unit was assigned a number, as well as a title, depending on what it's talking about. Okay, so in this case, classification became like a grocery store. Okay, so going on to the next slide. Once they click on the unit number, they get a note card with the unit's guiding questions. These guiding questions represent the learning goals of the unit and are the basis of material to take notes on for the student's mastery of the content. The questions are based on the Common Core requirements for biology. So here in the U.S., and I'm sure other countries have something similar, there are some very defined objectives as to what the kids should learn in the curriculum. So using that as my basis, I got these questions, which if the kids can answer the questions by the end of the unit, they've mastered the material. It also gives them some guidance as to what to take notes on as they go through the material inside the unit. So they click on that, they get the note card. Okay. Next, as they go inside, I have usually some item that provides some further guidance as to how to proceed. In this case, we have Timmy the Turtle. If you click on Timmy the Turtle, you see at the bottom there, it gives you an IM, welcome, whatever your name is. Here it says, welcome, a biologist, to the classification store. Talk to the storekeeper for more information about classification and taxonomy. Check out shelves for different kingdoms of organisms you find there. So the turtle gives you some guidance. It's good for the kids to explore, but some kids need more guidance, and I don't want them to feel lost or exasperated. So I give them these little helpers in the stores, if they want to use them, to give them a more guided tour of the material, so to speak. Okay. On the next slide, you see the core content, where it comes from. So when you click on the store manager there, it brings up this window. This is the digital textbook for this unit. The digital textbook has vocabulary, has pictures, has graphs, has videos, and of course has all the information. Okay. The digital textbook is through CK12, which included a link to CK12, so it's an open source, Common Core, freely available and customizable textbook source. So within this digital world, the kids have access to digital textbooks. And because it's a link, it will go with the OR. And because it's open source, anyone can use it. Okay? And it shows up pretty well within World too, although you can also open it outside in an external browser as well. So the textbook provides a chunk of the most of the material they need to answer those questions. Okay? Now, going on to the next slide, you see there, besides the Rodolfo was the name of the grocery man that I put on there, and some of the girls were quite thinking Rodolfo, by the way. It was really funny. But anyways, you see that I'm chunking the material further. The domains in different colors, the different kingdoms and different shelves. I have pictures showing examples of organisms from the different kingdoms. So again, trying to reach those visual learners as much as I can by chunking the material in different ways. Things you really wouldn't be able to achieve on a regular classroom. You have a whiteboard and a marker, and you try to show them up in front to everybody. And then as they click on stuff, they get information. They get told about that organism or about that kingdom. So they click around. It's interactive. Sometimes they have more text, but sometimes they have simulations, they have games, they have videos, they even have little assessments along the way. Okay. Now, let's see here. Okay, on the next slide, you see an example of what is assessment. So here, after going through that material, I have pictures of 3 organisms, which are hopefully alien to the students. Anyone know what that little guy is that the line goes to? It's a little microscopic organism. Maybe it's okay. But it's water bear, yeah. They're cool little guys, and they would survive just about anything. Yeah, tardigrade, yeah. So here they click on it, and the students probably don't know what it is, and they get a question. The question asks them, if you can see the top right, this is a heterotroph multicelled organism with no cell wall. What kingdom does it fit in? So if they've taken their notes properly in the kingdoms, they can get the right answer. What if they get the wrong answer? They simply get told that's not the right answer. Look at your notes. They can try again. So they can learn the right answer by knowing it from having learned it, by looking at their notes and then trying the question again, or by guessing. Now, is guessing wrong? I don't know. But I do know that if eventually they get it right, they understand that something that is a heterotroph multicellular with no cell wall is going to be in the animal kingdom. And that to me is what's important. So, and that's part of the gamification mechanics of it's okay to be wrong. You can just try again. So those little mini assessments, informal assessments, are throughout the experience so the kids can check themselves and see how they're doing. Okay? So on the next slide, you see something similar. Here I have a chart of 5 organisms and their complete taxonomic classification. Okay, so this is so the kids can see for examples of taxonomic classification of different things. They can see the human classification, how we compare to things. But furthermore, on those little purple circles, they click on them and they're quizzed on what is the phylum for this organism, or which organism is more related, or questions like that quizzes them on their knowledge of both the content and how the content works in the context of what we're talking about. So in other words, not just do you know the taxonomic classifications, but also do you know what they mean? Do you understand that to have more of those in similarity means that the 2 organisms are more related than not? The kingdom is a much larger general classification category than, say, a species or whatnot. So that's what I'm going for with these little interactive pieces. Not just more content, but rather an interactive experience that has them use the content in a way that helps them understand the significance of it. Okay, so going on to the next slide. I found early on that some students, they needed even more guidance. I'm not sure if they were just too scared of the new format, or if they were too unsure of themselves. But I didn't want them to feel frustrated, so I would add signs like the one on this wall saying, if you want to learn about this, go here and do this. If you want to learn about it, go here and do that. I felt like that was kind of patronizing, which is why I didn't have it to begin with, but some kids needed that. So I added it for them, because in the end, it's whatever caters to the kids. Although I think after a while, they stopped needing that reinforcement. Okay, on the next slide, you see some of the different content that I linked. In this case, when you click on the objects, you get this interactive animation that explains phylogenetic trees. And then it has more of the quiz type interactive piece that after you watch the video, asks you questions about relatedness and what a phylogenetic tree means. And lastly, in the next slide, I have some fun little things, games. There's lots of content online. And you click on the animals and it brings up a dichotomous key for a tree. So you have to actually get a leaf and use the key in the game to ID what the tree is. And it tells you if you're correct or not correct. So almost like an online lab that has you use a dichotomous key. So they have that skill to use, which is necessary for them for the EOC, the end of course test in biology. Okay. Now, what happens after they get through with the unit? They've done all that. They've gone through all their objective questions. They've answered them. They've done the games, they watch the videos, and hopefully they understand the content. What's next? Well, if you go to the next slide, there's a more formal assessment, and I say that in quotes because it's not. I didn't have this as a grade for them in the grade book. I'll have something else for that because this is the first go around. But this is fairly formal, that is a 10-question quiz. It keeps track of what they got right or they got wrong on the content for that unit. You see each unit has 3 colors. That's because they can only take each one once, so they get 3 tries at the test. Now, what is the significance of it if it's not for a grade? Each of these units has a project that the kids have to do, an artifact they have to produce using the content. The only way to get the description of the project is to get 10 out of 10 on this quiz, which to me is an indication of mastery. There are multiple choice questions and they're not trick questions. They should be able to answer them. So they take it once. If they don't get it all 10 right, they can take it again. If they take it a third time and don't get it right, to me that's an indication that maybe the kids need more reinforcement. So to get the project, which is required, they have to come to me, in which case I'll go ahead and remediate with them at that point. So it's a way to assess for mastery. It's a way to catch the kids that are not getting it, which never happened. The kids, by the third try, they would get them all right. Now, once they take this quiz, and the script that I found for this also keeps track, by the way, of all the kids and their scores. So I could look up how many tries each kid had to take and what their scores were. And that way kind of get an idea of how everyone is getting the content, how well they're understanding it. Okay? So, on the next slide, it shows you an example of a project. Here, after they get all the questions right, they get this note card. The note card has a description of the project. In this case, it's a taxonomic flyer. You make an informative flyer that gives a full scientific description or classification of an organism featured in your project from last week, from the food web project. It gives you the steps on how to do it, and at the bottom, a very clear rubric, which rubrics are important for the kids, so they are more comfortable with how they get their grade and what they need to focus on what to do. And the tempo of the class was that they would get 2 full days to do notes in class. This is in lieu of any kind of lectures. I would do a little bit of lecture in the beginning of the second and third day after they took notes to make sure they're understanding it. But it was informal lecture. They didn't take notes during it. We simply spoke and discussed the material. So that's 2 days of that. On the fourth and third and fourth day, so days 3 and 4, they worked on this project in class. On the 5th day, they would take a traditional test. So each unit was more or less around 5 days long, and the kids understood the pattern, and they got really comfortable with it, and it made them really at ease to know what was going on every day. It was designed so the kids didn't have homework. It's my philosophy that the kids should take the class in class, and then go home, maybe study sometimes, but otherwise go home and do home stuff. Spend time with family, do sports, do this stuff kids should be doing. I don't think school should be 24/7. I don't think that's the way to get kids, especially in science, to get interested and to achieve, to grind them like that. I don't think more schooling is necessarily better. I think quality schooling is better. So, at any rate, they would finish up after a week with the unit, and then we'd go into the next unit, and then I would do remediation at lunch if the need came. Okay, so last thing I wanted to show you in the next slide was where I showed them their work. So they do these artifacts, these cool projects. We get to put them on a display space, a common display space, and the kids would walk around and see each other's projects and discuss them and show them off and talk about them. Sometimes we have time to actually all get in world and talk about them. Sometimes we couldn't, but because they were digital, it allowed us to do this, which was kind of a fun additional thing I was able to do with the virtual world. And that central space was available. Thank you, Nova, for the kids. So I was really trying to, as much as I could, have an all-inclusive experience that gave any teacher that wanted to use this space different avenues as to how they wanted to do the content. So they could assess, they could interact with their kids, especially if it's a distance education environment, which is really just more suited for distance education. I was lucky to be able to do it in my class, so I could test it and ask the kids about it and troubleshoot it as it went along. The next slide shows you a test. So that's an example of a test. All my tests were very much situational. So I would say, for example, in this case, in this test on the Unit 3 classification, oceanographers are arguing over how to classify a new fish they found. Some think it's more like a shark. Some think it's more like a mud puppy because it has legs. And I gave the walking sharks classification, then a white reef shark, then a mud puppy, and then the kids would have to use what they learned to answer some very pointed questions. So no regurgitation here. It's a use of the information to solve problems and answer questions. Because to me, that's should be the end goal, not to recite off material from a textbook. I think that doesn't achieve anything, both for the student or for us as a society. I think we need students that can figure out problems and be creative thinkers, so that my test always had a situation. For example, for animal behavior, the test took the form of going to the prom. So you're at the prom and you're a wallflower observing all the kids at the prom. Use what you learn about animal behavior to figure out what kind of behavior is this. And one behavior is, for example, the jocks beating up anyone that was coming near the punch because that was their area. And that's like territorialism, protecting their area. And the kids will have to identify that. So they have to use the knowledge. So yes, I did have a more formal test at the end, which may be disappointing to some, but I needed something that could show my administration that I was achieving results, which is why I had a regular written test to finish up each unit. So, going on to the last slide, I kind of flew through this. It's been one of those days, y'all, but we'll have time for questions this way. The students are doing well. I'm still in the middle of the semester now. I finished this space, but the kids are now in unit 9 out of 13. So we're still have about a month to wrap up. They've been doing well assessments. Not everybody. Some kids struggle, some don't. But compared to my traditional classes, they do seem to be doing better on average. It's a small sample size, so I'm definitely not going to make any binding statements. It's 2 classes altogether, 25 kids, but they're getting along. They're comfortable. They're happy. They're well adjusted. They enjoy the class, and they can do these assessments and do well on them. I think I only had 2 kids fail last 9 weeks, and one of them was missed about 3 weeks because of an acute case of diabetes. That she ended up having diabetes and she wasn't taking care of herself. So I think that was an extreme case. So considering that I really had just one failure out of 25 kids, and I've spoken with her, she's turned it around since then. The system is not detrimental anyway. It doesn't seem to be doing any harm. The kids seem to enjoy it, and I'll have to wait on the end of course test results to see how they compare to the previous classes. It took about 2 weeks for them to get used to the system, like I mentioned. I thought it would take less than that, but when you have a good range of kids, some kids are. You cannot assume all the kids are technologically savvy. People say that all the time, digital generation, whatnot, but some kids are just not as comfortable as other kids. There's very little lag because I have no building. Previous experiments of doing this, yes, Stephen, I am going to be doing a survey. I usually do anyway for my classes, but I will do a survey and share that when I do see how they liked it. On previous iterations of a learning environment and worlds, I had building as a component. And at that time, I was doing it through Dreamland Metaverse, who is a very well respected hosting company for OpenSim. But the building cost, the kids having edit rights and building things interactively cost massive lag on a daily basis, and it couldn't be corrected to where I couldn't use that space anymore. In this space, I made sure not to include any of that and keep things fairly simple, and it has been flawlessly lagless for the most part. Every now and then it'll get a little bit laggy as to move around, but nothing that the kids can't get through it. And right now I still have 5 kids who still prefer to do things traditionally, like they just use a link to get stuff. And that's because they're individuals and they have their preferences. Some kids can just do it faster. It's just the way it is. But I think anyone that would expect this or any other tool to be a magic bullet that works 100% for everybody is just plain unrealistic. I think all the kids are individual, and the fact that 20 out of 25 prefer to do it this way, the traditional method, says a lot for this system. It's going to take a lot more testing, a lot more time for me to perfect it and see how it goes. But for this first go around of a virtual learning space, I've been very pleased with the results. The kids, which is the most important thing, enjoy it. They have fun with it. They have fun changing the avatars around. They can get around the world a lot easier. They have fun exploring the new areas. And I've seen them go back and explore older buildings when they review stuff and they forget things. The kids can get distracted sometimes. I'll catch them playing tag in world, flying around, bumping into each other and getting on each other's heads. But I believe that experience is the best teacher. And then when it comes time to the test, those kids feel themselves less prepared, struggle more, and then on the following go around, following week, they seem a lot more focused. And I think that's part of the lesson of what they're doing here, learning to be responsible. They have to learn to be independent learners. It's an independent learning space. And make it a point to let them flounder a little bit, because high school is the gateway to college or a profession, whatever it suits them best. And if they don't learn to discipline themselves here, then I don't think they're gonna be really successful after they're finished here. Oh, well, thank you so much. Um, no, some kids did come in after hours. Some kids did not have access to desktops after hours. That is one issue that is not easily resolvable right now with K to 12 education using virtual worlds. As of right now, you have to have a desktop or a high-end laptop. And most schools will have desktop, a computer lab, but it have a limited number of computers, and the computers themselves will be very limited. I was able to pick the computers we wanted for our lab so they can run this. But as of right now, this space may be more suitable for smaller schools that can get computers that cater for this, or for individual learners at their home that have desktops that can run this, or colleges, of course, that have more capita to invest in this. Um, Most high schools are going to Chromebooks, and until we get something that works off the browser, it's one of the reasons why this summer I'm looking into other options, because there's a limitation in K through 12 that is insurmountable right now. So Nova, that's the one thing. Yeah, parents did come and look. By the way, I'll make sure I get the last question. Some parents did comment on this, and they thought it was the craziest thing. But a lot of dads, especially, they said they really dug the video game look and feel to it. The administration agreed. Now, the things to fine tune, I have to go back and some scripts. Later on, I was able to get better scripts that ran more smoothly. I do like the fact that a lot of my assessments go to the IM instead of local chat, so the kids get feedback that is tailored for them as to how they did on questions. As you can tell, there isn't a lot of really high-end, fancy interaction. No breedables, for example. Like a lot of genetics use breedables. There's a lot of really fancy stuff you could do in virtual worlds. And when I first started working in virtual worlds, that is exactly what I was hoping to do with it. But I learned that unless you are a very accomplished scripter, have access to one, or have the money to pay for one, which are all a problem with a K through 12 teacher, it's just not feasible for you to plan on doing a lot of that in the world. Now, if I was to get together with a number of folks and they had those resources, I would definitely want to do more of those type of activities that use higher end scripting to do interactions and modeling within the world. But as of right now, I relied on things that I could really access, like online resources to provide the games and materials, so I could focus on the structure and finishing. Or grants. Grants would be amazing. Um, Yeah, Shelly. So the color and the size of the fonts. Yes, I wanted to make sure the kids did not become frustrated or lost within the world. I wanted to overemphasize the guidance, at least at first. And as it went on, I scaled some of that back, and I used more of like Timmy the Turtle to click on to tell you things, a little bit more toned down on the directions. But at the very first building tutorials is all bright letters and big posters and stuff, to get their attention, because at that age their attention is everywhere, and to tailor it for them, and it worked out for the most part. Even then, though, sometimes those kids would just walk right by the directions and go explore, which is perfectly fine with me. The kids that explore tend to figure stuff out on their own anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. That's why I chose kind of that theme of the bright colors and big fonts. Um, Good question. There are a lot of spaces in Second Life, and Steven showed me a bunch of them, and I've been to a number of presentations here in the Science Circle from very accomplished presenters, and of course Vibe and the best teaching practices. So there isn't one that I can point to. It's been mostly seeing what folks have done in the past, and then my own teaching experience, seeing what's worked with the kid. with the kids and trying to mash that together. That's the best way I can put it. So it has bits and pieces from a lot of on the shoulders of giants, basically, from a lot of other folks, a lot smarter than I am, a lot more accomplished than I am, that have already tried a bunch of different things. And I've tried to borrow the things that I thought would work best and bring it together in a space that was friendly to the kids and not too intimidating. For example, yeah, Genome Island is a great one. But some of these spaces, what I found out was that if I brought the kids there, they would get a little bit lost, or the content wasn't chunked in a way that they could match it to the objectives. So I try to be a lot more deliberate with the way the material was presented. Close together, those buildings close together, the units clearly labeled so they can follow along. And it may be that I can loosen up with that later on, depending on how they do. But at least for the time being, I think a lot of classroom teachers would appreciate that when they sign in, they can immediately see the objectives that they're familiar with in their classroom for their objectives, and they can follow along easily, which we're used to, and it's true. We're used to syllabi, we're used to having goals and objectives that are clearly defined. And administrators want to see that. You want to see that we're covering all the material. So, although I won't say is the ultimately the best way to go about it, I think for a K through 12 classroom, it's probably the best way to go for now, as we introduce using virtual worlds in classrooms at a public level, which I think that is my goal with this, is produce something that I could share with non-virtual world teachers that they could immediately see the value of and try themselves. And this is what ultimately this is, an OR that I'm hoping that brave teachers out there can take, open, and with very minimal effort use for their own kids. And or teachers can take them and modify it, because this is very easily modifiable. It's all links, and it's all images on textures, on prims, so anyone can take it and customize it like they want to, using the same concepts of chunking and putting things together. Thank you. Yeah, numbering assessments to keep track of where they are. Thank you so much. It's been a work in progress. Chantal and Jess, they probably thought I was dead, because I used to see them fairly often, and I haven't been to any meetings or anything in a long time. Same thing for Stephen. It's just been and I'll be honest, I'm tired. It's been a lot of work finding all the right links and coming up with the projects and the tests. But it's finished now, so I'll probably be taking a few weeks off before I start my next project. Well, chunking based on common core components, yeah. So yes, I think because we are ultimately the administrators are being looked at as far as how their students do on the common core assessments. The common core still needs to be a mainstay of whatever build. So when I did chunk, I did. Oh, I got a high five! Yay! When I did chunk, I did keep that in mind. It's like, what areas are being tested? What are if you distill the information, what are the main important learning components of what they need to know for biology? So when a chunk, yes, I think those 13 main ideas are at the end of the day the pillars of what makes up high school biology. And of course, all these are adaptable to any class. All the classes in the high school have a curriculum um, that is identified by some common core objectives. So I think that distilling them down to the important things and then bringing it to the virtual world is the best approach for us to receive an audience in academia. And that's my concern, because folks here are amazing. In virtual worlds, I met some folks that are as crazy creative, far more talented than I am. But sometimes they don't get a good audience once I show their work to some of the folks in the classroom, or when they present to others that are not part of the virtual world. And I think it just blows their mind. It's just too much for them. So we have to find a happy common ground that they'll let us that foot in the door, so we can bring the virtual worlds to everybody's classroom, not just the folks that already know how wonderful it is, the folks that are more dubious about it. And then once we do that, I think we can begin to blow their minds with less concrete, more abstract forms of teaching. So this to all of you, this probably seems a little bit mundane, and it is. It's basically a collection of images and links and buildings. Um, but when I've shown it off to other teachers in my class and around my building, they're like, "You made that? How's that even possible? How can you even make something like that?" And it blows them out of the water. So it's just a perception issue, you know. So um, apologies if it seems a bit mundane, but it's something we can work from. So is there any other? And I hope soon to be able to make, yeah, keep it simple. That's what I like to say. Um, yeah, you're right, Janice. Which is why I'm hoping, like this was. Once I get a break, I'll feel better about it. But this is all I'm gonna make it. Like I said, freely available somewhere, posted somewhere. Stephen will find a good place for it once we troubleshoot everything and make it nice. And as far as I'm concerned, anyone and everyone can have a copy. So hopefully it cuts down some of the work for them, and then they'll be more brave about using it, so they don't have to do the work themselves. That's how we spread the gospel, so to speak. My school, they are, especially the language teachers, are very interested in setting up like a restaurant and stuff for them to use. But again, the problem becomes technology, because all of a sudden, if they have a language class, the same block that I have biology class, and they both need to use the computers, we don't have the space, the computer space. The technology is becoming more of an issue than I thought, and it's not moving as fast as I thought. Like SL Go, the browser-based, mobile-based Go platform came out, what, a year now, maybe 2 years ago, when it first came out. Um, and I had hoped by now it would become something that's browser based, and maybe Second Life 2 will be browser based, but that's a big hurdle. But once that hurdle is crossed and we can do this on a browser, what's being shut down? I don't know that, CB. Oh, oh well. Well, that's not uplifting. But once we can get this platform on a browser, then it can really spread like wildfire. Because at least at the high school level in the U.S., the tool of choice. Anyone know what tool of choice is in the U.S. for digital content in the classroom right now? I wonder what everyone says, because they say different things. iPads? Anyone say iPads? Yeah. Yeah, so Stephen is right. The iPads are being phased out. Tablets are being phased out, at least at high school level. Chromebooks are becoming the tool of choice. Chromebooks are becoming the tool of choice internationally. Like Singapore put almost all their schools on Chromebooks, which will not download clients. It's completely browser based. So that's our next hurdle, folks. At least for me, being K through 12, it's got to be a browser based platform um, for it to be able to go into the classroom. So, any other questions? Sorry, I ended up a little short. Once I get going, I kind of run through things. Yeah, it's got to be browser based. I don't know what Lumia. Well, do I know what Lumia is? Seems like I might know it. I don't remember. There's a couple of browser based virtual worlds out there, but neither one did very well. Oh, sure, Dally. They're all standing outside the door, very scared to make too much noise. My dad was making a paella, so he said he's gonna wait to put it on until I get out there, because apparently you have to serve the paella right after it's cooked. So, but they're okay. They're fine. They're just out there having some tapas and having some snacks and talking it up. So yeah, development costs are high in Unity 3D. So which is why I can use that platform. Unreal, the Unreal engine just came for free. If you're brave enough to try that. Uh, Personally, my chips are on Second Life 2. Ed came and spoke with us in the science circle about needs for educators for Second Life 2. There's a lot of good things, or whatever Second Life 2.0 is going to be called. There's a lot of good things being said out there about it. So I'm really hoping that that platform will be viable for education. Because right now, Second Life, unfortunately, for its many advantages, it's too risky between what avatars can get their hands on, what you can get at the marketplace, which is inappropriate for kids, what the kids see when they open up the client. The fact that, of course, it's run on a browser. So there's a lot of reasons why it's really risky, even though I love this space and I've used it before. Um, I don't know anything about the Android viewer, unfortunately. If it ran on phones, even better. Um, so yeah, but I believe Second Life 2.0 they're going to address that. I've heard a lot of good things about making landing spaces just for education, and you only see the content that is related to your field, and then things that are age appropriate. So I'm really hoping that's the case. I think they're sensitive to that. So everything that we've been told seems to point in that direction. So I'm gonna have to look at that link. Thank you, Stephen. You always have all the resources. Okay, well, I hope it was informative. You have the link to the presentation if ever you want to reference it, and you guys can contact me through the Facebook space, or Stephen or Chantal or Jess can always get a hold of me if they need me. Hopefully, I'll be around more often now since this big project is done. I'll have a bit more downtime. Um, so thank you guys for having me. Is there any other questions? If not, I was gonna head on out. Oh, thank you. Oh, dear me. Well, I was gonna have to wait till Monday. Good. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Happy Easter. I'm gonna go off and enjoy some paella with the family. All right.